Okay, husband, are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
So, we took questions from our friends on, I guess, things they wanted to ask us about being newlyweds and our experiences and our journey, to marriage, to marital bliss. So, I'm just going to read the questions and we're going to answer. So, separate. How did you two prepare for marriage mentally?
I think that it was mainly from a spiritual standpoint. And when you say how did we prepare mentally, I think it was a lot of just us doing our own thing, making sure we was right ourselves. I mean, for me personally, it was a spiritual experience that I had to go through because I didn't want to seek nobody else but God to make sure that I'm doing the right thing and doing it the right way. So for me, it was all spiritual. I knew how to be a good man, but I wanted to have the Holy Spirit and conviction to make sure I'm doing the right thing. And I wanted the guidance of God. So, for me, it was a spiritual thing.
As a woman, and as for me, everything is a spiritual journey, and you want to make sure you're seeking God in every decision you make, especially marriage. But mentally, it was really about understanding my role as a wife, which is very different than the role I'm accustomed to living every day. Making sure that it was my desire to come home and serve my husband, which is, when you single, you be like, whatever, you're going to get up and get the stuff yourself. But, I mentally wanted to be, a wife who was always there for her husband. And so I just kind of started putting my mind towards those thoughts and kind of training myself on what things I wanted to be conscious and intentional about doing, because some stuff isn't natural. You have to make a conscious effort to do it. And so, yeah, that's what it was for me, just kind of figuring out what kind of wife I wanted to be in, knowing my role as a wife, and just kind of prepping myself for walking into that role. What topics should couples discuss before marriage?
Personally, I think counseling.
You need some good counseling.
You can discuss all the topics you want to discuss, but you need professional help to make sure you're being guided in the right way. And I think we had great counseling. We had great counseling, especially when we hear about other people's counseling. Not to compare, but our pastor was making sure we was in agreement, and that word is very important. Because you need to be in agreement about everything. When I say everything, everything. And that's what I think. You can discuss with all you want, but you need to be challenged as a couple going into marriage.
So, then I just talk about some of the things that were great that we got from counseling, that are discussions I feel like everybody should have before they get married. I think right away they asked about love languages. Being able to know and identify what makes your spouse feel loved versus what you think will make them feel loved is really important. Knowing we did like your 5 and 5.
5 and 5.
Yeah, and so that was like the top 5 things that you like or love about that person, the top 5 things you hate and don't like about that person, your expectations for your spouse, what was it, your goals for your marriage, and I can't remember what the last one was. But those alone, because everyone likes to talk about the stuff they have alike, but no one wants to talk about the stuff they don't have alike. And I'm like, when you're committed to somebody for life, you don't have to deal with those dislikes every single day.
That's true.
So, if you talk about it beforehand, at least y'all can figure out what the compromise is going to be, or you can put some things in place that's going to help you deal with whatever that discomfort is, as a unit. And then expectations are huge, because I think a lot of times we go into relationships and people aren't on the same page with what they expect from each other. in our heads we have, they should just expect this from me, but then they be expecting something different. So it's good to know ahead of time, this is what they expect from me as a wife, this is what they expect from me as a husband, so that you know whether or not you can give that or not, and if you're willing to before you say I do. So we need to do that in non-romantic relationships too. But yeah, it's just all that we got from counseling though. We just got really great counseling. And one thing I would add is, if there's like old hurts or like old wounds or things like that you're still dealing with, I think that's a conversation that's good to have. Because if you're not completely healed from something in your past, there's going to be something that's going to happen that's going to trigger it, and your spouse can be really caught off guard. They have no idea where that's coming from or where that wound is rooted at. So I just think that's a good conversation to have too with your spouse, your potential spouses. These are some things that I wrestle with for these reasons, and just being transparent, being vulnerable, and being honest about where you are can help. All right, next question is, at what moment did you two know without a doubt that you were going to get married?
This is an interesting question. I mean, I always say we so different than a traditional couple, because it wasn't a moment or nothing like that. It was something that we really had a discussion about. We really sit down and talked about it. We was actually engaged before I even gave her the ring. We sat down, we took it very seriously, and we weighed the pros and the cons. So it wasn't a moment, but I knew I wanted to marry her. I mean, and that wasn't really a question for me. But we really weighed our pros and cons and sit down and had a discussion. So that's from my standpoint.
Ooh, a moment without a doubt that you were going to get married. I think we always knew that, like, we were made to be married to each other. Mm-hmm. It just took us a while to just really align our lives individually with what we were supposed to be at before, it could happen. So we can go back to when we first, got together. I think then we knew, that, there's nobody else who's going to compliment, him like me, and vice versa. And it just didn't work out. We were just pushing something out of season, and we just need to be seasoned and go through a different kind of process. So it was just, I think we just kind of knew right away, and it just took us a while to get our lives in line and in order to be ready to be married. So
yeah, that's the best way to put it.
Our next question is, how was the transition from living in two different cities to living in the same household?
Really wasn't no transition for me. It's transitioned.
It wasn't hard for us. I know a lot of people say like it's a lot different when you're living with somebody after marriage, but I'm like, we were not only in different households, we were in two different cities, and it was just kind of seamless for us. I know that's not realistic, but
that's why I say we so different.
It was.
But we spent a lot of time getting to know each other, knowing each other's families, preparing each other for certain things. I think that's the best thing. Don't put your spouse in a situation and they don't know what's gonna happen. I think we did a lot of doing that. I always prepared her for whatever my family had to throw at her, my child, and so our transition together wasn't hard at all. Matter of fact, it was easy.
How was being a stepmom, and what challenges have you faced, if any, with that? I like being a stepmom. I guess I got the easiest role of being a stepmom because she doesn't live in the same city as us, and then she's older. So my stepdaughter is 17 years old, so it's easier to kind of rationalize and have a conversation with a teenager than it is, someone who's probably 8 or 7 trying to figure out who is this new woman, that's going to be around in my life. So it's been it's been fun. She and I get along well. We talk often, and I don't step into that role trying to be her mom. She's 17 years old. She's been raised by her mom. I don't need to step in and try to raise her. So that's not the role I take. That's not the approach I take. I just kind of look at myself as, somewhat of the auntie who just stepped into the picture. And so I just kind of approach it that way without being, like, overbearing. Like, you want to talk? I'm here. And vice versa. And it works well for us. So
I think also that my relationship with her mom and her is different. I mean, not different. Me and her mom has a great understanding. There's no drama there. We communicate well. So, it wasn't like she was coming into a situation where me and the mom beefed out and her mom going to trip with Dia. It was nothing like that. So we all got to understand it. And I think that made it a lot easier.
And then my stepdaughter would say, she was just like, as long as my dad happy, I'm okay. That's what she told me when one of her friends was like, man, you really like your stepmama? She was like, yeah. She's like, as long as my dad is happy, I'm good. So she's a sweet girl. How did you know after being in a relationship that marriage was a good next step?
I think for us, we went through a few transitions. We met each other, and eventually we got together. And during the whole process, we were like really straightforward with each other about everything, and we always had a great friendship. And then we broke up, and we was apart for a long time, but we dated. We talked, and so it was a process for us. And everybody's not gonna go through that same process. Hopefully they won't. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't good either. I think we had to grow up. Like she said, it was more of the season thing. But I knew that I had to make her an honest woman. I mean, if I consider myself a man of God, and I knew she was I knew she was a woman of God. I think it was just only right, And then I felt like we was always good for each other.
It's kind of hard to say that it was a good next step, because I think the first time we got together, both of our mindsets were, I didn't take relationships lightly. After my last one had ended, I was like, the next person I'm with, actually in a relationship with, like, you have to be somebody I actually see myself marrying. So if I don't look at you that way, I just won't be in a relationship with you. Like, we can just date and hang out, but there's no point in the commitment if I don't see you as somebody I can be with long term. So I entered the relationship with that, mindset, and that was conversations he and I used to have too when we were talking about, being together the first time around. But that second time we got together, you knew marriage was the next step, because it was just, everything else was just kind of stagnant. It wasn't really going anywhere. There's only so much that you're going to do as a single couple, and we had been best friends for years. The person after 7-8 years, and it was just about us just making a decision, like, are we gonna do this, or or move on. I just kind of how, in my mind, that's how it was. So I think he made a change really quick, and just to watch him just kind of transition over and watch him mature into a different kind of man definitely let me know that, we can do this and we're ready. And it just helped me realize there was some stuff that I had just kind of grew into in my own way. And let's go, let's do it. So our next question is, how do you handle disagreements, if any occur, without making it a big issue?
This may sound funny, but we disagree often. Even though we have the same morals and standards, the one thing that I always admired about Dia, and she said this to me when I first met her, just because I disagree with you don't mean I don't love you. We both are very strong-minded people. We both are very educated. We like the research. We both, I mean, you got to prove everything to each other, you know. So sometimes it's just like, okay. And then sometimes it's like, okay, prove it to me, you know. So we disagree often. It's not I don't remember us really arguing, because we rarely argue. We have a strong debate about like what we believe or what we talking about, but it's not like come to blows. I ain't talking to you no more or nothing like that. It's prove it to me. And if you can, fine. If you can't, almost like shut up. So move on from that situation. And the one thing I say to people, don't get caught up in that specific. Don't let that specific topic like change the way you treat each other. And it might do it for about a few minutes, but after that, move on. So that's my answer.
I think what make disagreements big issues is when the people involved or somebody involved doesn't want to be humble and understand that other person's point of view. So it's been from like my experience, and when you take and it also depends on how you approach that person too, because sometimes the approach can make a situation so much bigger than what it is. So you always want to make sure you're approaching somebody respectfully. Be mindful of your tone and your word choice, because that alone can make somebody extremely defensive. And sometimes you can come and talk to them the way that you should, and they'll still be defensive. So, but you don't want to make it so that it's on you. You know, that you started off the offense trying to resolve something. And yeah, I think people just have to be humble. We have to remember to be humble. And you want to listen to understand. And we want to make sure that we're empathetic to the other person's point of view. And I think sometimes we listen in an attempt to defend ourselves versus listening to understand where that person is coming from, and then work to resolve the situation. You know, people want to say, well, I got out what I got to say, and want to go on about their business. I'm like, that's not healthy. If we don't have a resolution on what we do with this situation, and then come up with a game plan on what to do the next time this comes up, you're going to always have that issue. So, you know, I would say definitely say listen to understand. Be mindful of your tone and how you approach that person. And then you want to make sure you guys are both putting forth the effort to resolve the situation. Because just getting it all out there does not fix anything. It may make one person feel better, but the other person is still going to be hurt. So, you know, work for a resolution together that you both are going to be happy with. So, question is, how have you adjusted to move into a new city away from friends and family? That has been interesting. In the beginning, it wasn't that bad, you know, because you're on this high because you're married and, you know, just looking forward to just being up under my husband all day, every day. And then, you know, his life picks up at a certain time of the year when it comes to his training and what he does. So that whole just sitting up under my husband just wasn't you know, a reality anymore. And then things happen and you kind of come off the high, you know, and the romance kind of changes, which is what life is going to be like, what marriage life is going to be like. And so romance will be, you know, up and down. I don't want to say it's challenging, but it is, because I'm used to being very involved and very active and having things to do. And you know, I have to always be mindful of my husband's time because he's busy all throughout the week. And on the weekends, he sets that day aside. He doesn't do any training. And that's his day for he and I to hang out. You know what I'm saying? And so I'm always mindful and conscious of, you know, his needs and his wants. Which would normally be a time that I would probably be out exploring. You know, trying to figure out what I'm into in this city. Trying to, you know, get connected in some kind of different groups or whatever. So it's been give and take, you know what I'm saying? So at times I miss my family, and most of the time I'm okay. So it hasn't been a big deal because I love my husband. I love being married to him. So, but it's still a transition I'm still adjusting to. Do you feel like it's a time limit on engagement, or how soon is too soon to be married?
I think that's a great question. And then here's what I would say to people. I don't get caught up in time limits or all of that. The biggest thing is understanding what marriage is. Like truly understanding what marriage is. And that's from a spiritual standpoint of what your role is going to be as a man and as a woman. Maturity, spiritual maturity, mentally responsibility maturity. I mean, because we already knew what we wanted, I think, as our roles. She had her own individual thoughts. I had my own. And, you know, for me, it was growing up, no urges, seeking God, making smart choices, being a good provider and a good husband. Funny story, I told one of my friends I was getting married, and the first thing he said is, I wonder how long it's going to take for you to cheat. And I didn't get offended by that. Most people really would, because the bad part about that him saying that is that's become a norm in our society, right? So I was glad he said that to me, because it was a way of holding myself accountable. Like, is this really the way it's supposed to be? No, that means he hasn't grown up yet. Because I personally never consider myself to ever cheat on my wife, and I take that personal. I want to be a great husband. I always said when I became a husband, I wanted to be the best husband I possibly could be to her. So I think it's a lot of maturity. I don't think time plays a role in any of this. Don't get me wrong. You shouldn't meet somebody in tomorrow.
Get married the next month.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is growth. It takes growth, and but you have to grow up and understand what marriage is really about, what the component is, because this is no joke, and it's a serious thing. And marriage is forever. If you go in it like, man, as soon as this person irritates me, I'm gone, then don't ever think about getting married. If you go in it thinking like, dang, I still like shorty over here, don't do it, you know. And that was the biggest thing for me, you know, because when I was in college, I loved women, and that urge is no longer there. 0% urge to be with. I only like being with my wife, you know. And that ain't saying that I'm blind or oblivious to other women. It's just saying that my urge that I have is for my wife only. So that's kind of like how I look at it.
I don't know what else to say after he said all that. Something to be conscious of, though, and as a woman, you have to pay close attention to the habits of the person you're with, of the man you're with. And I heard on the radio when I was a little girl, the host was saying, you always want to be with someone for at least all 4 seasons, because everybody is different depending on the season. And I just think it's good to be conscious of that, because we all act different depending on what time of the year it is, whether you want to admit it or not. Summer, you completely different than how you are in the winter. So I've been with him or been around him, and we've been best friends for so long that I know what to expect emotionally depending on what time of the year it is. I know what habits he has, what things that he's going to give and not going to give, depending on what time of the year it is, and that's just something that he does and doesn't do subconsciously. You always want to pay attention to people's character, and it takes you time to see people in different situations so you can really understand how much they really value their character and their integrity, because sometimes people's personalities will have you blinded to their true character. You know, we ignore little things because people seem like they wouldn't be, you know, a certain kind of way, and we just got to pay attention to how people respond in certain situations. You walk by certain things and it's just kind of like, you know, don't be afraid to just challenge people when it comes to what you see and you know, questions you have about their character and integrity, because people's character and your integrity should mean everything, and it doesn't always. So making sure that you've seen them in enough situations that you can kind of gauge their character. So how do you find time for balance when it comes to together time and time apart for individuality?
I think that we both have projects and things that we aspire to do, and when we start working on those things, we make sure each other have enough space so we can accomplish what we need to accomplish. When we have questions, we ask each other, but for the most part, we kind of give each other the distance, because you have to still have your own identity, regardless if you're married or not. And I think we've done a good job of that. And I don't mind, and I know she don't mind, because I'm busy most of the time working on my project, which is being a great basketball trainer, and she's writing a book and doing some other things, and that's important to her, and it's important to me, and vice versa.
I don't think it's anything to be. I think people are scared of it. I think especially women, they are afraid of getting swallowed up in their marriage. And I think as long as you both go in there understanding that you need individual time, time alone, and have that understanding, it's going to be a lot easier than you realize. And, things are going to be up and down. Like right now, his priority is getting his business done, getting his business established, getting that going. So that has become my priority too. And so it was like, as his helpmeet, I can't be so caught up on saying, okay, I need some me time, like every week for at least 5 hours. It's a sacrifice at times, and I'm like, look, this is priority. This is part of his destiny, and it's my job as his helpmeet to be there. And so, even when we have a pretty decent sized apartment, so you just find ways to get your me time. Like when he's off at training, I have the house to myself. That's my time to be able to just sit back and do whatever I want. Or if I'm working on, a project or something and I'm in the other room, he just leaves me to my space and to my time to do whatever it is I'm doing, and he doesn't interrupt that moment. And I think we almost feel like me time requires one to be on one side of the city and the other person to be in another. And I think you can do that in your own home if you kind of establish that between the two of you. So if I don't have me time in a week, I'm not dying, for me time. But at the same time, I'm like, you should love being around your spouse. Like, you guys should be best friends, that it's not going to kill you if you go a couple of weeks without having a few hours to yourself. And like I said, at times you will have to make the sacrifice. Right now, his business is a priority. So I'm like, what do we need to do? Work on a website. We need to do what? And once that is where it is he wants it to be at, then I'll go back to my stuff. And then there'll be a time where that's going to switch. When what I'm doing, it needs to be on the forefront, and I'm sure he'll make the sacrifices to be there to support me. So just don't be afraid of being swallowed up. Just make sure that you guys establish that, that you guys are going to keep your individuality, and that you're going to be committed to each other, but also being willing to give each other space. We're not like controlling. So if I just say I want to go get some ice cream by myself, he's not going to have a fit. Has the compromise part been smooth? And her additional comment is, I know I am strongly opinionated and I like things a certain way. Was it easy to mesh your lifestyles into one?
I say again, we are a little different.
Very.
I think that people, they make a big deal out of the small things. And as a man, I always want her to be happy. So, and I don't have a big ego, so that helps. I don't need to be like, oh, I'm the man, so you got to do it this way. And I know who I married as well. I married a strong, bold black woman. So, I respect that. I respect her power, and it's not that big of a deal. It don't scare me. It don't intimidate me, because I'm a strong black man. So when you start talking about compromise and all that, I don't even think we go through stuff like that. I could be wrong, but I don't. What she does don't bother me. You know, how she talked don't bother me. How she challenged me don't bother me. It actually makes me better. It makes me think more. So, you know, I really don't. I haven't really really experienced that stuff or really paid too much attention to it.
I think we are a very unique situation. When you think about both of us don't have the mindset to argue a lot, you know, we're not big on always getting our way. Just as individuals, we both are that way. I don't have time to be arguing with you all the time. You know, it's just not in our personalities to be that way. And so with both of us being like-minded like that, the compromise part was pretty easy. And lifestyles meshing, it was just, it wasn't that hard. Not saying that we don't have, like, you know, little speed bumps or whatever,
right.
But it's just different because we're married now. And certain things that probably you didn't make, you kind of brushed off before you were married as no big deal, you know, you can't really do that anymore. Because it's like you have to just keep brushing it off for the rest of your life. Like, this person is not going anywhere. So it's like, look, we got to take care, you know, and address this habit, you know, or this pattern or this whatever it is. So I think, one, just always being mindful that this is a lifelong commitment. So if neither person is willing to compromise, that's going to make that lifelong journey really hard. So
I think the best thing the pastor said to us is making sure that you want the best for your spouse at all times. And if you keep that mindset, I think it makes it a little easier. It makes it a lot easier to deal with. I mean, because I always want the best for her. She always wants the best for me. So you got to humble yourself and making sure that the other person is comfortable. And it may take a little time, but you got to do it eventually.
And then don't be afraid to break the ice. You know, there are just going to be situations at times that are going to be a little awkward, or, you know, you're a bit nervous of the outcome or the response. But you have to be bold enough to just kind of say, look, let's go ahead and hash this out so we can figure out what we need to do to make this work. Because if you want a fruitful and prosperous marriage, it's going to take some sacrificing. And people won't know what to compromise on or what sacrifices to make if we don't speak up. So no one's going to read your mind and know that this is a problem for you. So that's part of compromising, is great communication and being able to just be honest about what the situation is. People can't fix what they don't know is wrong. So, you know, if you're wishing the best for each other, you'll be willing to do that. I'm not saying it's going to always be easy, but your marriage will prosper from it if you're willing to just make that sacrifice in those moments. So that was the last question. So we thank you guys for asking us questions for our first Ask the Nobles Newlywed Edition. So we'll try to do this more often.
Alrighty. Bye-bye.